Hello and welcome to another video. Today we'll be taking a look at the siege of Leningrad. We'll take a look at the historical context, the beginning of the siege, the humanitarian crisis, survival and resistance, military defense, relief and end of the siege, social and cultural impact, political and military impact, historiographical perspectives, controversies and criticism, as well as some books and quotes. First up, let's start with the historical context. The siege of Leningrad occurred during World War II as part of the broader German invasion of the Soviet Union known as Operation Barbarossa, launched on June 22, 1941. Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, was strategically and symbolically crucial for both Germany and the Soviet Union. For the Germans, capturing it meant a significant blow to Soviet morale and logistics. For the Soviets, defending it was vital for the survival of the state and national pride. Leningrad had been preparing for potential conflict with Germany, fortifying defenses and organizing civilian preparedness for a protracted struggle. Beginning of the siege. The German army group north, with support from Finnish forces, began encircling Leningrad in early September 1941. By September 8, 1941, German forces had cut off all land routes to the city, initiating the siege. Severed supply lines leading to severe shortages of food, fuel, and other essentials for the city's population and defenders. German artillery and aerial bombardments targeted infrastructure and residential areas, aiming to demoralize the population and force a surrender. Humanitarian crisis. One of the most harrowing aspects of the siege was the widespread famine. By the winter of 1941-1942, food rations were drastically reduced, leading to mass starvation. Daily rations dropped to as low as 125 grams of bread per person. The brutal winters exacerbated the crisis, with temperatures plummeting, fuel shortages leading to freezing conditions, and limited medical supplies, making disease and injury treatment difficult. An estimated 1 million civilians died during the siege, primarily from starvation, cold, and bombardment. The death toll represents one of the highest civilian casualty rates in any siege in history. Survival and resistance. Despite the blockade, the Soviet authorities in Leningrad implemented strict rationing and resource management. Innovations such as the cultivation of root vegetables in small urban plots and the use of sawdust bread helped extend limited food supplies. The only lifeline to the city was the Road of Life, Ladoga, which was used to transport food, fuel, and evacuate civilians. In winter, an ice road facilitated transport, while in summer boats were used. The city maintained its cultural life as a form of resistance. The Leningrad Symphony Orchestra famously performed Dmitri Shostakovich's 7th Symphony, the Leningrad Symphony, in August of 1942, which was broadcasted to boost morals. Military defense. The Soviet Red Army and local militia units defended the city with fortifications, counterattacks, and relentless resistance. Defensive lines, including the Luga Line and the Polkova Heights, were crucial in slowing the German advance. Soviet partisans behind German lines disrupted supply routes and communication, further complicating German efforts to maintain the siege. Multiple Soviet offensives aimed at breaking the siege, including the Sinyavino Offensive in 1942 and the more successful Operation Iskra in 1943, which partially reopened land communication with the city. Relief and end of the siege. In January of 1943, Operation Iskra succeeded in opening a narrow land corridor along the southern shore of Lake Ladoga, improving the supply situation and allowing limited evacuation. The full siege was lifted on January 27, 1944, after a major Soviet offensive pushed German forces away from the city and re-established secure land connections. This date is commemorated annually as the end of the siege of Leningrad. Following the siege, the city faced the monumental task of rebuilding its infrastructure and housing, while dealing with the long-term psychological and physical effects on its surviving population. Social and cultural impact. The siege became a symbol of Soviet resilience and heroism. The city's endurance was widely celebrated in Soviet propaganda and remains a significant aspect of Russian historical memory. The survival of Leningrad is commemorated in literature, music, and film, with works like Shostakovich's Seventh Symphony and Olga Bergold's poetry encapsulating the struggle and spirit of the city. Numerous monuments and memorials in St. Petersburg, such as the monument to the heroic defenders of Leningrad, honor the victims and survivors of the siege. Political and military impact. The inability of German forces to capture Leningrad marked a significant failure in Hitler's strategy on the Eastern Front, diverting resources and attention from other critical campaigns. The successful defense and eventual relief of Leningrad bolstered Soviet morale and demonstrated the Red Army's growing effectiveness in resisting and countering the German invasion. The siege influenced Soviet military tactics and planning, contributing to the development of urban defense strategies and the integration of civilian resilience into wartime logistics. Historiographical perspectives. Soviet historiography emphasizes the siege as a heroic defense against fascist aggression, often highlighting the unity and sacrifice of the city's population and defenders. Western historians have examined the siege within the broader context of World War II, focusing on the interplay between military strategies, civilian suffering, and the psychological impact of prolonged siege warfare. Contemporary scholars analyze the siege with a nuanced view of both the Soviet leadership's decisions and the resilience of the Leningrad population, considering both the heroism and the hardships faced. Controversies and criticism. Criticisms have been directed at the Soviet authorities' handling of rationing and the prioritization of resources, with allegations of corruption and inefficiency exacerbating the crisis. The initial failure to evacuate more civilians before the full encirclement and the prioritization of certain groups for evacuation during the siege have been points of contention. The immense suffering endured by the civilian population has been a focal point for discussion on the human cost of war and the ethics of siege warfare. Now for some books and quotes. First up, The Siege of Leningrad, 1941 to 1944, 900 Days of Terror, by David M. Glantz. Provides a comprehensive military and civilian account of the siege. Leningrad, State of Siege, by Michael Jones. It explores the human experience of the siege, focusing on personal stories and the impact on Leningrad citizens. Now for some quotes. Never in history has there been a siege like this. It is a war of annihilation. It is not a case of seizing the city, but rather of wiping it from the face of the earth. Adolf Hitler. There can be no comparison in history for the endurance and resilience shown by the people of Leningrad during the siege. Harrison E. Salisbury. The city's spirit, embodied in its citizens' determination to survive, stands as a testament to human resilience in the face of unimagined hardship. Michael Jones. Our city remains defiant and our will unbroken, despite the hunger, the cold, and the constant threat of death. Olga Bergold. Leningrad's survival was not just a military victory, but a profound human triumph against the worst that war could offer. Anna Reid. In the symphony of the siege, every citizen played a part. Every life contributed to the harmony of survival against the cacophony of destruction. Brian Moynihan. The siege showed the world both the horrors of modern warfare and the indomitable spirit of those who endured them. David M. Glantz. That was all for today. Thank you for listening.